Jaiji.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pre-India Internet Governance Forum session, which is on a very important topic of voice-based internet. You've got some very prominent people on the panel today. But before I introduce them, let me first go into the issue itself, and then I'll bring back the two panelists. India is one of the largest countries with the largest population of print blind. What print blind essentially means is people who are not able to access written information. And although at a breakneck speed, we are rolling out internet in today's world in India with various initiatives which are being coordinated through Gati Shakti. It's a Prime Minister's program. We are coordinating them through BharatNet 1, BharatNet 2, and now the very ambitious BharatNet 3 program that we have, which is again one of the largest telecom program that is going on in the world. But if people are not able to read what is there on the screen, then we have got a serious problem. And that's a very unique Indian problem because we have about 290 million people who are illiterate, if they can't read, and about 19 million people who are visually challenged, and therefore, again, they cannot read. So, what is it that we need to do to make sure that our internet is made for the 25% of our population who are print blind? And for that, we are fortunate to have KRISHNAKANT Mane, one of the leading, foremost visually challenged computer scientists in our country. He is not only a computer scientist, he's also an entrepreneur who has been coming out with technologies which are for the visually challenged as well as the normally abled. We also have a leading lawyer who has focused on issues related to accessibility and internet and digital. And we've got BAGMISIKHA Puhan, who's also an associate partner with one of the leading firms in India. With that, I'll start off with my first question to KRISHNAKANT Mane. KRISHNAKANT, or KK as you are popularly called, what is your views on the internet not being accessible, and therefore what are the alternatives that we have to enable the internet to be accessed by people who are not able to access it in the normal way?
You see, first of all, good evening, everyone. It's a lovely panel which we have put up here, and I'm very happy to be a part of this. So, Jaji, to answer your question, you see, you've already given the stats, and that's saved quite a bit of my time. Percent people are print blind. Also, there is another factor: people who are not really print blind, but this micro businesses, they have this placebo of not getting onto these mobile apps, and and they somehow have a problem typing stuff in. They may not have a problem of reading it, but they have definitely a problem of typing things, and as a result, you can also consider them into that category. Now, what happens is, let's say you have you enter a society wherein you have got airports all over the place, and you have got aeroplanes, but if you don't have a proper runway which can actually take the load, then apparently there is no use of saying that we are speeding up the country. And so the same situation is here. We have 5G now, and it's least to say that even the remotest of the villages in India has good internet. It was a problem some time back, but now it's not a problem, so to speak. Now, when there is so much of print blindness, as you rightly pointed out, and a lot of these people are traders, they are small traders, they are small service providers, and we are not here talking about people who can afford to use huge ERP softwares and big accounting softwares. We are talking about those roadside shops. We are talking about rural traders. We are talking about small micro businesses, often run by challenged people, often run by disabled people. Now, if we don't make this system inclusive, there are a few problems which happen. Number one, they wouldn't come in the infrastructure network of the online trade, because everything today is online. Number two, because government wants everyone to be a part of the GST network, which is a really good thing, because they will also, it's not just about paying taxes, you get input credits and all. They will not be able to avail any of these things. As a result, the value of their business goes down. Number three, the overall business scalability of these people always remains subpar, because other people who can afford softwares, other people who are not print blind, then this is an unfair playing ground for those small people who are self-employed and are providing services. Now if this happens, then there will be a general unrest in the business sector as well, and then there will be only a few who would be really getting all the benefits of whatever government has to offer, and the masses for whom the government really wants to do stuff are going to be left out. And this is exactly where the problem comes in.
Great. So I think that's very, very perceptive. And KK, let me, allow me to quote something that you have been quoting very often, which is that even under normal circumstances, those who are supposed to be not having any challenges end up having challenges, because if they are driving a car and they need to
Yeah,
see the internet, they can't see the internet because they're driving a
precisely.
car. All right, so I'll just borrow that from you, and I'll have a follow-up question. So, what do you mean by a voice-based internet, KK?
So a voice-based internet is exactly what that is the reason this is one of those fortunate jargons which are self-explanatory. But I'll go more deep into it. Apparently, it means that you see, if there are people who are from the non-technical line, I'll give you a simple analogy. So when you talk about computer, because a mobile, a laptop, everything is a computer. All the things are computers right now. Just like humans, there would be different senses. We have five. A computer can have many senses, right? So how do you do the information in and information out? Because this is how humans communicate. There is an information in, you get an input of information, which is sensory, and you give output, which is the motor response. Now what does a computer do? There are various outputs, like you would have a screen, you would have a printer, all that stuff. Similarly, there are several inputs, which is keyboard, mouse. Okay, now one of those senses is also a microphone these days. Now, the best way to put a microphone to use is to see to it that people who are print blind, who cannot see, and people who cannot type, because it's both ways. Now, to a great extent, people who cannot see, a person like myself, the problem is sorted out, because if there's voice-driven system, everything on the internet can work through voice, as in making payments, receiving payments, or communicating or sending quotations, or receiving intimations about stuff like invoices and all. Now if you're going to have a virtual or a physical keyboard involved all the time, then again the problem which we talked about comes in. But if the internet is voice driven, if we can have a lot of interfaces which are purely voice driven and they're online. Why online? Because you have to have them access anytime, anywhere. And things like if I give you a very common analogy, nowadays when I go to buy vegetables, or even at the roadside, and you make a payment through GPay or whichever means, there is a small machine which says Paytm per X amount prapt hua, kind of a thing. See the miracle. Now everyone, as a result, people who are really technophobic are now installing those machines. They are going online. And now, because then they don't have to worry about whether I have got the payment, whether I've got the payment right. If there's a disabled person who doesn't know whether the person has given you the right amount and all, it happens without moving your hands. So while driving, what you're doing, your hands are on the steering wheel. While doing business, and imagine a shop where there are only 2 or 3 people working, and the load is very heavy. Now, with medium or large scale companies, you have got a huge lot of teams for different things. But these small and micro businesses hardly have 4 or 5 people working with them. So they don't even have an HR payroll for that matter. So they have limited hands, And as I jokingly keep on saying, कि लोगों के हाथ कानून नहीं है लंबे करने के लिए. So what happens as a result is that they don't have that much time, that much capacity or bandwidth to all the time be stuck to a laptop or a mobile and do stuff. So when you're online, you have to have ways to save time of a person who's low on resources, which is the case with small and micro businesses. And for that reason, you have to have a both-way voice-driven system. It's not just about receiving feedback, it's also about giving feedback. Now we have Alexa and stuff like that. but we have to see to it that they are in tune with the local Indian systems, because the vocabulary, the lingo, the kind of jargons, local traders, for example, use in the villages, they vary so much that we have to have very, very smart online voice driven systems which can learn by themselves by more and more data. So that has to be totally hands free, right?
Great. No, thanks. So that brings me to BAGMISIKHA. BAGMISIKHA is an associate partner at TMT Law Practice. What do you think are the challenges of a voice-based internet? For example, can we have a voice-based click wrap agreement that is prevalent in the usual internet websites? Can we have all the legal foundations in a voice-based internet, or are there new challenges that we'll be facing?
Thanks, Jajit. Now, from whatever KK has already discussed about, if I have to borrow the discussions that he has brought to the fore, we have a large population which is finding difficulty in maneuvering through the internet, be it to connect with other resources or to be able to get into an engagement with another party, or for that matter to be able to use it in their regular day-to-day business or day-to-day lives. Now, one of the best aspects to this that we can actually draw from and look into our own legal structure in India is that because of the challenge that was there in terms of literacy or in terms of the education levels in the country, you look at the sector of healthcare, which is highly sensitive and highly regulated, we see that there has been and there continues to be an arrangement where, for the purposes of, I'm talking here from the perspective of clinical trials, where for focused participation in clinical trials, again a very sensitive issue, there has always been a model and there have been proper codes of conduct following the WHO practices as well, where a voice based consent regime is accepted. Now, within that, to ensure, the logic was that because in clinical trials the participation is not just from a large, from high social classes, but also from people who are either disabled or people who have disabilities in form of basic communication skills and literacy. To overcome this, there was a concept of audiovisual recordings which was introduced, where it was ensured that for the purposes of explaining to the participant that they will be participating in this highly sensitive and significant clinical trial, the logic was that they could record their consent in an audiovisual format. The logic which was driven to this was that a person first communicates to them, probably in a language familiar to them, that this is what the consequences of a trial would be and this is what will be involved. And it was to elicit their consent that for the first time we saw that audiovisual consent was allowed for to be treated as consent for the participation in clinical trials. Within this itself, now since we are talking focusing mostly on voice based internet, within that also for the purposes of safeguarding privacy of individuals, let's say who are suffering from communicable diseases like leprosy and AIDS, it was decided that they would move away from audio visual requirement to only audio based connections. Now, while there is this, I am discussing more from the point of view of clinical trials, and I will of course come back to this later when through this discussion. The structure or the regime in which we are currently, living in and practicing, you will see. I mean, one of the fair points that KK actually mentioned is that even for today to make inputs and outputs, especially he gave the example of Paytm. Here, one of the essential elements that he was trying to point out is that is a case of notification. There, as an output, what the machine gives me is a notification of receipt of money. However, for an input, if I'm using a voice-based system, imagine tomorrow, I mean, if I am using, let's say, not just to dictate a text, which is now enabled on Android devices and iOS devices equally, but if I am initiating a financial transaction through voice-based communication only, there is an inherent susceptibility or there is an inherent potential of abuse that may be caused, and that is probably one of the reasons why we are seeing that the adoption in that sense is not highly prevalent, or there has not been too much of test cases for us to discuss on. While of course it comes with its own set of benefits, but to answer your specific question, as in how the voice based consent regime currently stands or how we are looking at it from an Indian perspective right now, It has very limited application, and we are seeing that the limited application is mostly focused in the healthcare sector. When I'm talking about law, apart from that, when we're talking about devices or connectivity, again it's just limited to the point of inputs being for the purpose of, let's say, dictation and text. And here again, Jajit, I'll have to bring to the fore that this is again used by healthcare sector a lot. When you see that today, for electronic medical records or for health information systems, you see a lot of healthcare practitioners and healthcare institutions relying upon softwares and tools which create entire records of an individual's medical history or treatment journey on that particular software. So, this is my immediate response to the question that you have put forth. I mean, if you have any follow-up question, then I'll address that, or probably we can come back to me later.
No, absolutely. I have some, very a few follow-up questions based on what you mentioned, because it start tickling my thoughts. Given that we have this population which is signing off agreements, which is putting thumbprint on agreements and saying, "Done. I've accepted this," and then falling into debt traps and all kinds of situations. We have, a whole bunch of popular Hindi movies made on this, where Angota Chap Dalke you had accepted, which essentially means that there was no consent-based acceptance of the agreements. Now, the point is, will a voice-based agreement be upheld in the court of law, and what is needed to be added, and what needs to be strengthened in order to ensure that such agreements are accepted in the court of law far more widely? What should be the role of government, in fact, to enable such an infrastructure?
Thanks, Rajit. So here I will add one thing that in the court of law as of now, I'll again go back to the healthcare example. That is the only sector which has been tested in terms of audio consent or allowing for an entire journey to be undertaken by an individual basis their voice-based consent or inputs. Now, coming to the fact that where now we have come to the very convenient ecosystem of just clicking on an I agree or submitting that I accept, or just accepting a tick box in a particular app or in an agreement or in an end user legal license agreement, if that is something that we can base upon for entering into a valid contract with a large entity or to enter into a standard form of contract, there is nothing stopping us from doing it, replicating it otherwise also beyond the scope. However, like I mentioned, that the only point where we have seen this has been tested is in the healthcare. Now, that's not the use case for any other. I mean, it still remains untested. While I'm at this, I'll just add one more point quickly. That if most of us who have ever used a digital service, a digital signature certificate, we were always asked to create a recording saying that I am so and so. This is my ID proof, to establish that validity or to bring in that additional layer of identification of me as an individual. There is nothing stopping us to actually create something like that in our contracts to ensure that people who have any limitation to be able to communicate in a particular language or to be able to read through text, because today even MS Word allows me for dictation. It also allows me to listen to something. Same thing tomorrow if we are using a Washington Post application or an Economist, even they are reading out news articles to us. Same thing with the PDF. I can still listen to the text that's written. So if along with that, if I coincide another tool which is either a voice recording or an additional, like I mentioned about the DSC system, then the fact that I have established a valid identity and then I'm tagging that identity to the consenting to a particular agreement or to an engagement, that could be something which could be looked favorably by courts also, so that to ensure that there is no duress or undue coercion that I have been subjected to submit myself to it.
Right. No, that brings me to Krishnakant Mane, who is a technology expert in this area. Is Krishnakant, I can always claim that, hey, I did not make this recording. This is done by a deep fake. This was, recorded in another system, and it's not something which is which is non-repudiable. So, what is the infrastructure that we would need to make it non-repudiable and therefore dependable, and therefore it can be upheld in the court of law from a technology perspective?
Good. I was hoping you will ask this. I'll give you even one step further. Forget about hey, it was not recorded or fake. I can't remember, because since you raised movies are very good analogies. You see, I can't remember the name of that movie, or was it dubbed in Hindi, Independence Day or what? I don't know. that there was a terrorist who had hacked into the system and was going to launch a nuclear missile, and the password to do anything with that was I think what dulhan ki bidai ka waqt badalna hai. So if you want to change something, you have to say this, and I mean that person has to say it, no one else can say it, and only if his voice is recognized, the password is valid, and then you can change stuff. So our military officer goes there and he gets him into talking, and dheere dheere, one by one phrases he gets. There's a kid sitting at the other end who is receiving these audio samples. He puts them together very finely without glitches and all, and then it is played to the computer with the terrorist's voice, and the password is accepted. So here you are even going one step further. I mean, this is, although it's a movie, but it may as well happen. My voices can be taken in phrases and to be exactly used the way it is. Now, one thing is that you will have to have a good deal of, I'll tell you, it may not be 100% foolproof, but to at least make it 99 or 99.9% foolproof, there are various textual fields of voices. I have done a bit of modest work on natural language processing and voice recognition. There are some finer aspects of voice, and I think IBM has worked a lot on that as well. Google is doing it. So just recording the voices, having the understandability or legibility of the voices and processing it is not enough. There is an individual signature to a person's voice, which is nowadays forensically also you can prove it. If someone says that this video was doctored and this wasn't my audio, I mean BAGMISIKHA can get into the law more on this, but I know already forensic people are able to figure out. What we will have to do is develop cost-effective means of doing things what the forensic labs do when someone claims that my video or audio was a fake one, to have it down in an affordable way and to the same level or perhaps more accurate level of what it is today, because every voice has a proper signature decay. There is a signature sustenance of every word that a person speaks, the envelope, so to speak. There's this envelope with the sound wave. Right now what is happening is you take the sound wave, you take the word patterns and you process it, and the computer understands. But you will have to have a more accurate way of processing a signature envelope of every voice. And even a mimicry artist, no matter how good a mimicry artist is, he will not be able to accurately mimic the voice 100%. I'll tell you, I mean, I have sharper ears. Jaideep has been with me enough and he would know it. We have met several times. I can tell you whether a person is imitating or not imitating, even if he's a very good mimicry artist. So that's my side, but computers can be more accurate. So, those signature envelopes have to be processed more forensically, I guess. And that's where a lot of work has to go.
Right. So KK, taking that forward, clearly none of that infrastructure exists with either the judiciary or the government, and more importantly, by the judiciary as well as by the enforcement agencies. So
Yes.
I would then draw a conclusion that that is an infrastructure that needs to be put up for us to
Yes,
take
very
things
true.
forward. Isn't that
Yes,
so?
yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
So
And it has
Karen,
to be
taking
online. Yeah.
it has to be online, absolutely, absolutely. It has to be in servers which are notified by the judiciary that those are acceptable
Yes.
servers, and therefore they're time stamped and non-repudiable, as well as there
Yes.
are additional layers of checks and balances so that
Yes.
deep fakes and AIs do not take over. So,
Yes.
having said that, Krishnakant, you have worked very deeply in coming out with solutions for the good of Indians, as well as for those who are print blind. So, what has been your entrepreneurial journey in this area, and what are your vision moving forward? What do you plan to do to enable voice-based applications to happen?
Yeah. Vision is the word you said, because I always keep telling people, because people ask me that you yourself are totally visually disabled, and how come you are into all this? So I always keep telling them vision is more important than eyesight. You have to have a vision, whether you have an eyesight or not, really won't matter. And if you could manage to develop the things which we are talking about right now, then eyesight will really not matter, as a matter of fact. So as far as my journey is concerned, uh, it has always been like this. See, when I was just in my early 20s, I got into engineering because I always was fascinated. When I was hardly 14, 15 years, I knew that this is one technology which is going to take the humans' accuracy, efficiency, and what you can say, creativity, the accuracy, efficiency, and creativity to an infinite height. And today it's all true. I mean, today now there are artificial intelligence systems making music. Forget about voice recognition. So I always had that thought, and I was actively contributing to things which could serve the digitally underserved. And in countries like India, it's a huge population, right? They are digitally underserved. I wouldn't go as far to say that they are not served. They are definitely, everyone has a mobile now, but they are underserved. So they don't have all the benefits of the usual stuff or something which they ought to. So in that process, when I, for example, worked on Orca, I think you were then with Sun Microsystems, and Sun had funded this entire thing, and I was one of the initial pioneers of that entire thing. And that actually created a big revolution, because when the free talking screen reader, the free talking software Orca, when it came out, we did a work with Tamil Nadu government. If you want, you can Google True Vision, and ELCOT, Electronics Corporation of Tamil Nadu. I was the one who led that project, and Orca was at the center of that entire project, where we taught visually disabled people to use it. So education was also raised, and they apparently got employment, because proprietary talking softwares were there, but they would cost you 1 lakh rupees a license. And you can understand, if they are digitally underprivileged, how much they can afford. So we did that. After that, I also realized I was an independent consultant, working for a lot of other companies. And in that process, I realized the small and micro businesses have one fundamental problem. The problem is they don't have that volume of requirement of complex features in a software, in a business software, number one. Number two, they don't have knowledge of accounting or advanced trade. And number three, they cannot afford huge softwares of huge brands. So what do we do? So what we ended up doing is NIXI, in fact, had funded my initiative back in 2009, and we developed something called as GNU Khata, which is an open source accounting and invoicing software, which, by the way, is taught in curriculums in Maharashtra, in elementary commerce, and even in Kerala. And a lot of people, volumes and volumes of people are using it, and it is actually also generated employment, because since it is in school curriculums and college curriculums, there are people who are running classes teaching GNU Khata. And then I thought to make it more enterprise. So inspired by that, actually me and my wife finally co-founded a company called Bookmatic Private Limited. And we launched an online version of a billing software. But what we did over there was we automated the accounting. So when a small or a micro business, what they do is they have their bills, their typical bills, and they have typical receipts and payments. There is no HR, there is no payroll, there is no production planning. These small and service providers and micro businesses don't need it. So we said, hey, why not make a software which is specific to that requirement, limited features, only what they need, and give it at a very, very low rate. So like 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees a year is what we give. And we have a free mobile app as well. And now what we are thinking is, so we have automated the accounting part. So, but still person has to make invoices, right? Person has to make bills. They have to record bills. Now what we think is, that's the reason I was very interested with this panel, is to do even that automatically. So if a certain person says, 3 kilo sabzi ka bill banao, or whatever it is, I'm talking in a very crude way, just the way he will tell his assistant. So he doesn't even need an assistant. And then if the bill is generated, and if the payment is done automatically, and of course nowadays you have this talking Paytm machines and all, and he also gets the intimation of payment done. Imagine this is completely hands-free. Even an Anguta chap, in your analogy, can use it. Even a disabled person can use it. A blind person who's having no hands. Chalo, print disabled ko chhod dete hai. A person may not be print disabled. What about people who don't have hands? They can't even type. They will have to rely. I mean, the Thakur of Sholay kind of a person. What such a person would do, even if he's literate, he would need such technologies, right? So this is our next pioneering step we are putting, that we should have these voice-driven interfaces even for small trades wherein the accounting is automated and the bills are voice-driven.
Right. So KK, just for a upfront declaration, the reason I used Bollywood analogies is because of your close association with Bollywood. You've been interviewed by Amir Khan, and you've come on shows and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And that's the reason that I chose to do that.
No, and then there are the true mirrors as well, right?
Absolutely.
Those movies are true mirrors. That's the reason I gave the example of that password being collated together and saved the mankind.
Right. So, that brings me back to BAGMISIKHA, and I think BAGMISIKHA, you might be on mute. We have a population of print blind, which is 290 people, 90 million people visually challenged, 20 million people who are 290 million people who are illiterate, 20 million people who are visually challenged. So 310 million of market size, which is almost as big as Europe. But we see that the developments are happening in US and other places in terms of voice enabled access. It's not voice developed internet, but voice enabled access. You have Alexa, which is getting more and more prevalent. You got Google solutions, but we don't see such solutions coming up in India. And why is that? Because the market is here, and still we don't see solutions coming up here.
Thanks, Rajit. So I will pick again, borrow something from what Krishnakant mentioned during his discussion. He highlighted a very important element that when we are talking about voice print of individuals, that's also very unique to an individual. I mean, including be my intonation about a particular word, it could be my modulation when I am speaking in a particular context, and the fact that this is actually particularly more significant from the European context. We have seen that for the purpose of recognition, if I am using voice inputs for an individual to identify or to establish that this is coming from, let's say, a Bagmishika or a Jayjit, be it to I'll limit this to, let's say, an OK Google or Siri for this discussion. We saw that especially Siri moved, and same with OK Google, they moved from a particular timeline where they would only recognize a particular accent to now when I have an Apple device, I can set that my voice input would be an Indian accent or would be a larger Asian accent, or I can select if it's British or American, Australian. Now, yes, you are right that so we have seen that these developments are taking place in the West more. But I think one of the reasons, I mean, again, I will not speak from the business point of view, but I'm seeing that there's a lot of cost which goes into creating a software or a technology which will not just ensure that there is a level of authentication which is attributed to a particular voice print, which is extremely distinct to an individual. The issue or the challenge added to this is that because voice prints are very much typical to an individual and they can identify, they have the capability of identifying an individual per se, there are challenges related to privacy. Now, that's why I mentioned that in the European context, this plays out a major role, is because when I am limiting my conversation, let's say to just a voice input saying that, let's say Siri shut down my phone, or Siri open the app and send a message to so and so person. Now that's okay. But when I'm going to the point of, let's say, asking Siri to call up my healthcare practitioner and then probably issue and, call up my hospital and ask them to send out an ambulance because I might be suffering from hypertensive, there could be a infection. I could be thinking that I'm suffering from a heart attack because there is elements of, other health information, and this I'm giving from a health perspective, but it could also be that if I'm initiating a bank transaction, it's carrying financial details. Now that entire input will stop being just personal data, it will qualify to be sensitive personal data, which is again required to be monitored or kept in a very secure manner. Because there are so many overlaps with how law will just not look at it from the point of view of identifying that yes, this command has come from the owner of the device, because it has implications with other laws, like I particularly mentioned data privacy. I think companies here, because in the absence of clear absence of comprehensive data privacy legislation, I think the companies here are not willing to expend that kind of money in creating a solution in house till they do not know what the law is going to say tomorrow. So, in that example that he mentioned about the movie 16 December, where he said that, there's this particular terrorist who tried to bring together a string of clips and create that voice command for a password. Imagine, let's not go to the extent of a terrorist activity being caused, but imagine that construct being created even for a simple task of sending someone 1,000 rupees, or for that matter today when we are living in such an interconnected world, for that matter, creating, let's say, like I said, to give a doctor an input about my health condition, or for that matter my legal advisor an input about what I am doing right now. So because of these, unwarranted challenges and there is such a high scope of uncharted territory here, both from legal and a business risk perspective. I think that's why we are not seeing a lot of adoption here in the country.
Right. So, Bagmishika, if I take that forward, clearly voice-based contracts will be of importance even in the Western area, right?
Ji.
For the reasons that you just mentioned, for example, clinical trials, you need to make sure that the person understands, and therefore each of those clauses needs to be explained and explained in a manner that the person understands, not wrapped up in legal jargon, right? Which even we don't understand, in spite of having a fairly good grasp of English. But legalese is a separate language altogether, right?
Right.
In fact, if I look at it from that perspective of who all understand legalese, it'll be less than 0.01% of the population. The rest are all, legally sprint blind, if I can say that. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense to simplify things and have voice-based contracts and so on. In fact, if I look at it from the perspective of ensuring that those who are above the age of 18 are the ones who are agreeing to contracts, then technology along with voice-based signatures can help in identifying that. So what I'm driving at, Bagmishika, is a question as to why the West is not taking a lead in having voice-based contracts and voice-based agreements.
Okay, here I think I'll have to take a leap of faith when I'm, giving you an answer to this. Again, even in West, from what we have seen, even in terms of forensics, they're advanced. They have those capabilities where they can make the determination that depending on the modulation or the structure in which a person is framing their sentences, if it's actually stemming from an individual or not. While they do have the wherewithal of creating voice enabled systems, again in the West is also, I mean, first things first, law always is subsequent to technology always precedes, so there, and it goes in leaps and bounds ahead of what how the law follows. One of the reasons I mentioned is privacy is a challenge, that's why they do not want to take that step. Second thing, it's also a cost. Now the reason, the coming back to the example of clinical trials, because here there the test bed or the large population that's there is something which could be subjected to a matter of life and death. That's why they made this abundantly clear that somebody has to explain to them in their own language they understand, and they go ahead and make the signature. Now coming to the simple aspect of executing a plain and simple contract, which could be a commercial contract between two parties who are capable of entering into that agreement and they can actually sign that agreement, but because of paucity of time or because of remote presence, they want to execute it in a voice enabled environment. One of the reasons which comes to my mind why they would not they would want to be reluctant to bring into the this into the regular practice is there is a requirement to have consent being preserved somewhere. Now imagine today a signature, if scanned, might carry a lesser space, a storage space, as opposed to a voice command. Because when I'm trying to record a voice for an individual, just to mark the fact, like because you also mentioned that there's a sense of element of timestamp being attributed to any single clicks or any single visits we're making to a URL. Now imagine if I'm recording a voice, an audio saying that I, BAGMISIKHA PUHAN, from so and so place, I have been explained the terms of the contract, and on such date and such time, I'm saving this particular, I'm executing this contract, and this is hereby supposed to be treated as my consent. Now that entire piece will, I am assuming, and I'm not a technologist here, but I'm certain will be creating more space and will capture a lot of storage space in their records than a simple entry saying a click wrap where I have put a tick mark and there's an entry made that this person has ticked at this particular time from this IP device. Now, I'm just saying from a cost perspective of creating an an audit trail, even that will consume so much of space. So I think, when they know that if I am not signing, I'll get somebody else to sign on my behalf, so they're happy with it. So I think the uptake is something which has not come to the fore so much that there is more of there's this drive to innovate in that pace.
Right. No, makes sense. Makes sense. Very interesting, Bhavishika. That brings me to Krishnakant, and this is probably a last question because we're out of time before we take the Q&As coming from the audience. Krishnakant, what is your take on inclusive online internet for trade? and how do you think we can improve it with voice-driven apps, especially for the micro business and the MSMEs?
Okay. In fact, you asked the question at a very right juncture, because I was about to, where Bagmishika mentioned about the problem. I think now the situation may improve, because she raised a very valid point of space, about the space, that virtual space you need to keep things, because now even the data is a thing. It's considered as good as a hard thing. Okay, so that's true. But now when you're doing a distributed system, wherein you have distributed server farms all over the world, and with blockchain there is no one particular entity which can decide whether this is the final thing or not. I'm not getting into a lot of technical stuff, but in a nutshell, yes, with the help of the distributed disk space architectures available now, with blockchain helping out to keep the integrity right, and with all the data science processing happening, it's only about some big initiatives taken. So taking from there, I'll tell you what, I began by saying that we have 5G in India, and I can specifically talk about India. But the inclusivity is not at power at which it was ought to be, or it was supposed to be there, because we talked about things like Mission 2020. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam used to talk about it. And I had a brief conversation with him back then, a long time back. And I told him, I said, I modestly disagreed with you for a simple reason, and I'm now vindicated, that this is not going to happen when, this print disability and all the issues I took ahead. And I said, it will take a lot of time. So when I talk specifically about micro trade and small businesses and all, if we make it inclusive, and we can, using voice driven interfaces, the only thing which puts these people away from using technology and scaling their business, no matter what their business type is that they find it, number one, it's very complicated. Yaar, kaun seekhte baithega? Second, the disability which they have, which could be visual, which could be not having hands and stuff. Third, there is a general phobia of, is this really going to help me without harming me? Now, if voice interfaces is something which you feel that it's mera apna hai karke, kind of, it's like a human talking. If I start using Alexa or Google Assistant in front of my parents who are very old, they really get astonished. Arey, phone se baat ki ja sakti hai like a human. You can talk with a phone. So the kind of businesses which we are talking, and we are looking at the bottom side of the pyramid, huge amounts of small businesses. What, 57 million small businesses today? 57 million is not a small figure. And if we can give them interfaces where they have zero learning curve, except the fact that they should know how to talk, which they do know, and if we see to it that the voice driven interfaces are tuned around their way of speaking, not the other way around. We don't have to train them ki aise baat karo. We have to understand, we have to know how they talk, what is their jargons, what is their business lingo which they use during normal trading hours, on their shop, in their dispensary, in a local sabzi market, or a fertilizer supplier, or a small logistics provider, tour agent. I stay in Goa, so I know what tour agents do. So you see, when these colloquialities come into play, when the voice interfaces become something which they can feel it's mine, it's about, I'm talking to my own assistant who's coming from my own village. Such should be the interface comfort of voice driven interfaces. And it's not too difficult to do technically. All that you need is a great initiative.
Right. So Krishnakant, I think with that, we have run out of time. So I'll take a couple of quick questions that are coming in there, a whole bunch of questions coming in.
Oh.
I'll have a follow-up question to both of you coming from those who are attending this session. Is what do you think should be an opportunity for startups in India? So I'll go first with Krishnakant Mane and then to BAGMISIKHA. KK, what do you think are the opportunities for startups? And I think you mentioned quite a bit. But if you want to leave one mantra behind, what would it be?
It's a simple cliche, problem and pain is the mother of all innovation. So we already know what the pain is. And we know that there is so much startup investment happening. We do have a lot of futuristic investors here, futuristic angel investors who know that this is not going to yield profits, so to speak, in the coming 3-4 years. I think startups should start looking for incubators who are into doing such things. And if you have a product, like my company already has a product which is doing pretty well and there are users using it, now we want to modify it and become a pioneer in a different way with the voice driven interfaces. We need government support, government agencies, like there are so many NICs, the NIXI is there, the information technology ministry has a lot of programs going on. Or you can have accelerators who really understand what is being done. And technically speaking, let me say this very clearly, today is a world of integration. So I don't have to develop as a startup owner, as a tech startup owner or a founder. I will tell you what, I don't have to develop everything right from scratch. You can actually get, like, I want to develop a certain thing, 99% of those components are available already. They are individual components in themselves. All that you have to do is you have to take those components together. Just in the olden days, the electronic person would build a printed circuit board with all the ICs and transistors and capacitors. This is exactly what you have to do now. Almost everything is there. You have to integrate it smartly, and the remaining 1% is your innovation, how you manipulate it. So that's my message to all the tech startups. It's not that difficult to do once you have a good investor.
Wow, I mean, that's quite a bit. Thank you, KK. And moving to BAGMISIKHA, same question to you, BAGMISIKHA.
So just adding to what KK said, because of digital innovation, and now we are talking about a pre-IIGF conference, there's so much of help or policy guidelines which are coming from the central government and as well as state governments. One of the good opportunities is, at least I can identify three sectors. That's your telecom, health, and finance, where there are a lot of regulatory sandboxes which are being created. So for startups, from a legal point of view, where they have the innovation that they want to base upon, they can integrate themselves or they can apply for these programs, and they will be given test laws to work around with. So that way they can actually test out a product with a closed user group and also say that they're acting in compliance with law. Then they can take it forward how they want to go about with the product.
51 minutes.
Great. Sounds great. I think that brings me to the second question that I see that has popped up. And I'll pose it back to you, BAGMISIKHA, because it is in continuation with what you said. And the question is, what do you think should the government of India be doing to promote voice-based internet?
First, I think they should come up with a policy statement for which you and I will have to work towards convincing them that there is a general requirement and it is actually in line with the innovation schemes that they are already proposing. So when they're talking about an open governance digital commerce network, when they're trying to bring in an inclusive framework for small and medium enterprises as well as large platforms to actually give them technology to support the smaller companies, first thing that the government needs to do is bring out a policy roadmap. Then from there on, they can talk about, like I said, couple it with the regulatory sandboxes and then see how to take it forward from there with a larger law or probably with light touch regulation.
Great. KK, over to you. What do you think the government should be doing? And you have worked with IIT Bombay on various issues. So
yes.
what do you think the
I
government
think
should do?
BAGMISIKHA has already said it. I want to ask one question to BAGMISIKHA on the basis of which I can actually further say something. Is voice samples also considered to be a biological part of a person legally?
So in India, there is no clear-cut distinction made, but under European laws, they have added that voice inputs can be added as biometric references, and that's probably we will look at also.
So to add to what BAGMISIKHA said, I think the government will have to do a lot of sensitization. The way a government has gone about, executing a plan to let people invest in mutual funds. Mutual funds sahi hai. So many ads come from the Finance and Commerce Ministry. You see, you all know, right, what happened with Aadhaar. When Aadhaar came, there was so much of opposition, and some parts of the opposition were genuine and correct. I wouldn't say they were wrong. Okay, the fingerprint thing was there, the iris scanner. Even I was against it because I wouldn't be able to get the privilege of an Aadhaar card just because I don't have a retina, right? So such a thing is going to happen because there will be a lot of hoo-halla if these things go to the level of an Aadhaar, centralized voice banks, wherein if you want to prove the genuineness of a voice or you want to do stuff. So a lot of, because technologically I don't have to say any further because I've already told that all the tools are available. You have to just be a smart integrator, you have to be a smart innovator, and you actually can do proper combinations and permutations of stuff. But a lot of sensitization will be needed to make people understand you need not be afraid of this. And as BAGMISIKHA has already said, that you need a legal infrastructure, proper policy, but a lot of sensitization at the very zero ground level is going to be required to let people understand and encourage them to use this. Because policy might be there, technology might be there, but what if the phobia continues? And that can only be done by government through the media available today.
Great. I think we've completely run out of time, but this has been an absolutely stunningly enlightening session. I learned a lot, and I hope the rest of the delegates who have been online also had a lot of learning from this session. I hope this really puts the efforts of having a print blind enabled internet into the next year. Many of us have been working on it for over 10, 12 years. And KK, you and I have been partnering to push these policies forward.
Yes.
We have had many events. We have had the government adopting the CAT4 standards, the standards which enables the government websites to be enabled to be read by a screen reader. I think we have had successes, but we need more, more. And I think India needs to take that lead, because we are the ones who really need this solution. So there's been a absolutely brilliant conversation. I've been able to learn a lot from this. And this was part of the pre-India Internet Governance Forum, which is a curtain raiser sessions of the India Internet Governance Forum, which is being held under the aegis of UNIGF. So I would request everybody to also attend the India IGF, which will happen in the first week of December. And with that, I would like to thank KRISHNAKANT Mane and BAGMISIKHA PUHAN. We have been very, very privileged to have both of you in today's session, and we will look forward to many such sessions in the future.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Krishnakant.
Great, Jajit. Actually, we would have loved to hear more from you, actually, because there's much more to learn from you.
That's very kind of you. Those are very kind words. I'm sure we'll have more such sessions and we'll exchange ideas.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye.